Hello, students. Welcome back. We are starting the second video that is associated with Modular 5, Practice with Individuals, Families, and Groups. So, taking up where we left off after the first video, we are going to spend some time talking about the development of practice skills. So again, this goes back to the idea of we've talked about the toolkit, right? Now I guess what we're talking about more is about the muscles and learning those skills and learning those ways of being able to implement social work interventions. So the book talks about conceptual skills, and conceptual skills are skills that enable the social worker to view the client's many situations and relationships not as separate, discrete entities within the client's life, but rather as interacting parts of the client's behavioral response within the environment that the client is a part of. So it's fairly common that a client may present with a single presenting issue. However, once you start to do your assessment and get to know the client better, you'll learn that there are probably other issues that are compounding the situation that the client initially presents with. It's important to learn how to be able to integrate all of those issues together so that you're not looking at 6 different things separately, but you're looking at 6 different things and their relationship to each other and their relationship to the client. Conceptual skills also involve an ability to place the client's needs within a framework and to arrive at appropriate intervention strategies to address those needs. So just as we said, rather than taking a look at 6 separate issues, you're looking at it comprehensively, and you'll often find that whatever you've decided to try to implement is going to address many more than just the one that the client presented with. So as a good use of your time, as an effective strategy, as to not have the client in treatment or in counseling for a long period of time, you can find that more than one issue can be addressed by a single intervention that you're implementing. So here are some practice skills that are important for social workers. And the first one I want to talk about is interviewing skills. There are different kinds of interviewing skills or different kinds of interviews. There is an informational interview. So for instance, taking a client's history. There is a diagnostic or assessment interview, which often has more of a clinical focus. A therapeutic interview, which is designed to help the client make changes in their lives. And throughout all of this, it becomes important to use what is identified as empathy. And empathy is often defined as putting oneself in the client's shoes. So using empathy throughout any kind of interviewing process is valuable strategy, effective at being able to move the relationship forward and to be able to get the most information in terms of being able to make an effective assessment. Social workers meet with clients, they talk with clients a lot. At any given time, you may be jumping between an informational interview or a therapeutic interview, but all of these are important in terms of working with clients. And in addition to the interviewing skills, recording skills, properly maintaining records enables the social worker to review the nature of the situation, objectives, and the progress for each case. In addition to the importance of record keeping and recording, often social workers are called into court. And so having strong documentation that will support a decision that a social worker has made on behalf of their agency for a particular client is critically important in terms of issues around liability, as well as simply just providing appropriate services to the client when you are taking a look at some kind of legal consequence for the work that you're doing with them. It is important for beginning social workers to be aware that not all clients are equally motivated to engage in the plan change process. no matter how good the social worker is, and adequate resources may not be available to fully meet clients' needs. So let's talk a little bit about that. The plan change process is very fluid. You will find the client moving from one particular step. I think the best way to describe it is the kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. So clients are consistently making progress, but also having setbacks. And so from a social work perspective, there's a need to stay very flexible and very willing to reevaluate when necessary, simply because of the variety of different issues that a client may walk in the door with. And it's also important to recognize that you may decide or designate that there's a particular service that the client could benefit from, but it becomes important for you not to be identifying a service need that the client has that you don't have within your community, or that you don't have a way to be able to address it within your community. So, you know, in some communities, if you're working with someone who's experiencing domestic violence and you're telling them, you know, you need to get to a shelter and there is no shelter and the client does not have adequate transportation, that could be, you know, difficult for them. So you have to really think through what it is that you're suggesting and make sure that you're able to align those resources with what the client needs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but obviously, if you do, as a social worker, move into more of a clinical practice, there are a variety of different kinds of theories and skills that are directly related to conducting therapy or doing therapy. So ego psychology, a system of psychoanalytic developmental psychology concerned especially with personality. The ego psychology approach is the practice theory that stresses the interplay between the individual's internal state and the external environment. I think the easiest way for me to always think about ego psychology is it's that little voice in your brain that keeps telling you, you know, you're no good. You completely failed that exam. You're not pretty. You're not handsome. You're not smart. While the outside world sees you as a competent, smart, pretty person. It's that friction between your internal voice and the way that the world actually perceives you. Problem-solving therapy is a cognitive behavioral intervention. This is one that's often used when you're specifically looking at wanting to make changes in behavior. Excuse me. And we're back. Cognitive behavioral therapy, similar to problem-solving therapy, often quite short-term, goal-oriented, hands-on, practical approach. Cognitive behavioral therapy often involves homework that the clients have between sessions with a therapist. And so they talk about what it is that they'd like to change. They explore with the therapist or the social worker what they think would help support them to be able to move into that change. And they're given a homework assignment to try to practice implementing that change. And then they come back the following week and are able to report back to the therapist or the social worker how that practicing session happened or how it proceeded. And then family systems therapy is based on Murray Bowen's family systems theory. Again, this is a way of being able to work with families. And it's important when working with families, particularly around the family systems therapy, that you have to stay cognizant of the individuals in the family if you're doing family therapy, because the change in behavior in one family member is likely to have an influence on the way the family functions over time. So individuals and families, again, task-centered social work, again, very similar to the other ones that we spoke about. And then you have things like feminist theory or therapy, solution-focused brief therapy, and client-centered therapy. So let's spend some time and talk about social work interventions with families. So obviously in this case, you are working with more than one individual. We're going to talk about this in an upcoming modular, but it's important to recognize the diversity of what we recognize as families these days. So families can be people who are blood related. Families can be people who live together or reside together. It can be people who are married to each other, who are not married to each other. It can be a combination. It can be multi-generational. So it can be grandparents, parents, and children. It's really however you define what is your family. There's a term that's often used called chosen family. So these are the people who are in your life. They're a part of your life that you've chosen because they bring you happiness and they're supportive and they feel like family. And so we call them family. And so all of that is legitimate when you're talking about social work interventions with families. So social workers long have recognized that the family unit provides physical and emotional support for its members and shapes their identity. So particularly when you're talking about raising children and you're talking about providing support for the physical and emotional members of the family that are the children, that's definitely a role that family members play. So families experience change in structure and role, life transitions, patterns of communication, conflict, and crisis. We certainly see families evolving and changing, people coming and people going, and all of that can result in problems in terms of people in their environments. Social workers often focus on the family as a unit of intervention, recognize that all members of the family are affected by the problems of any one member. So we are looking in this situation about treating the family and not the individuals, although certainly individuals could be in one-on-one therapy on their own and also be participating in family therapy. We can certainly use the plan change process. So all of those steps that we talked about earlier is something that you can use with families. Social workers incorporate strength-based and empowerment perspectives along with all the other theories that can be used in terms of working with individuals. Those same things can be used when working with families. Social workers also help the family identify current and intergenerational patterns that impact communication, roles, and decision-making within the family. And, you know, I think it's quite interesting, but it does sort of come down to more often than not, when you're taking a look at challenges that families are having in terms of functioning successfully, you can take a look at the fact that more often than not, it's going to have something to do with communication, maybe something to do with roles, a role expectation, things that we think dad should be doing that he's not doing, things that mom is doing that we don't think she should be doing. And then there's always, there can always be challenges and friction in terms of decision-making within a family. So most of the theories and practice approaches that are used with individuals, again, can also be used with families, often based on systems theory. So you can take a look at a family and the environments that the family is a part of and see where the dysfunction may be happening. You can also take a look at subsystems within the family. So sometimes it's about the parents, sometimes it might be about the children, sometimes it may be a relationship between two members, the mom and the youngest daughter, and that really the whole family needs to work together, but you could also be needing to address these particular subsystems within a family. Structured family therapy focuses on identifying the subsystems, the alignments, and the boundaries within the larger family system, and then working with the family to change identified patterns, coalitions, and conflicts. So here's an example. Getting a father to discipline or spend special time with a child when those roles have previously been the domain of the mother can be one way to change family communication patterns that occur within family subsystems. So maybe you've got a mom who's feeling very overwhelmed and feels like she needs more assistance with childcare, and maybe there's a need for one particular child to have a stronger or more effective relationship with the father. And so by changing those roles and changing those responsibilities within the family structure, you've alleviated one issue, the pressure that the mom is having, and you've improved upon another issue, the relationship between possibly the father and one of the children in the family. So we are going to pause there. This is video number 2 for modular 5. And when we come back, we'll begin our conversation about groups.